What I am about to show you is the most important shift in global finance happening right now. The dollar index has fallen to 97.65, down 9.26% over the last 12 months. It reached a nearly four-year low in January, officially breaking below the key 97.0 level and reaching a low of 95.5. But here is what they are not telling you on mainstream financial news. The U.S. national debt is nearing $39 trillion and could reach $40 trillion by the end of this year. The debt has hit 100% of GDP. All the major credit rating agencies have downgraded U.S. debt, and the IMF has publicly warned that U.S. debt is out of control. While the dollar breaks down, something else is rising. Silver has surged over 150% in the past year. Central banks are hoarding gold at record levels, and BRICS nations have launched a gold-backed settlement currency to bypass the dollar entirely. If you own silver, you need to understand what is happening. If you are thinking about buying silver, you need to understand why silver could play a critical role in the new monetary system being built right now. Something massive just broke. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what it is. Welcome to AG Profit Hub. This is where we cut through the noise and expose what is really happening in precious metals markets, while everyone else feeds you the official narrative. Subscribe right now and hit that notification bell, because what I am about to reveal could change everything you think you know about money itself. If you find value in this video, smash that like button. It helps the algorithm show this to more people who need to see the truth. And trust me, this is information the mainstream financial media refuses to connect for you. Before I show you the data, let me remind you what has been happening. The dollar has been cratering in line with calls for a resumption of dollar weakness with the start of 2026. What is especially ominous is how quickly we have fallen below the range in which the dollar traded for the second half of last year. That is usually a sign that momentum is building, which means this round of dollar weakness is far from done. Foreign investors are once again rushing to hedge their dollar holdings, which means we are seeing another crisis of confidence. This will damage U.S. reserve currency status if it keeps happening. And here is what the institutions are projecting. We anticipate that the next few years will see a secular bear market for the dollar as investors diversify away from U.S. dollar-denominated securities and central banks reduce their treasury holdings. That is RSM's chief economist, one of the most respected voices on Wall Street. A secular bear market, not a correction, a structural decline. Let me explain exactly why the dollar broke, because most people do not understand this, and that misunderstanding could cost them everything. The U.S. debt crisis continues to ferment, with federal debt exceeding $37 trillion, or over 130% of GDP. In January, the auction yield for 30-year Treasury bonds rose as demand for U.S. debt fell, weakening the dollar's credit backing. Let me put that in perspective. The gross debt in our nation is now nearly $37 trillion, almost as large as all of the other wealthy economies combined. And it gets worse. As of May 2025, all the major credit rating agencies had downgraded U.S. debt, and there is a growing perception among banks and foreign governments that hold trillions of dollars in U.S. debt that the country's fiscal policy may be going off the rails. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget just released an alarming report. If the national debt continues to grow faster than the economy, the country could ultimately experience a financial crisis, an inflation crisis, an austerity crisis, a currency crisis, a default crisis, a gradual crisis, or some combination of crises. 6 different types of crises. All possible. All connected to debt. Interest costs on the debt surged to roughly $1 trillion last year, consuming a near-record 18% of federal revenue, an amount comparable to the entire Medicare budget. $1 trillion just in interest payments. That is money that cannot be spent on infrastructure, defense, healthcare, or anything else productive. It just services existing debt. And here is the critical insight. With debt at 100% of GDP, the U.S. has less fiscal space than any time in history in case of another war, pandemic, or recession. Now let me show you what is happening globally in response to this crisis. While the U.S. drowns in debt, the rest of the world is building an escape route. The de-dollarization process accelerated in January 2026. BRICS nations announced they would increase the share of internal trade settled in local currencies from 35% to 50%. ASEAN plans to establish a regional unified payment system by 2027 to reduce reliance on the dollar. But that is just the beginning. Russia and China now settle around 90% of trade in rubles and yuan, while BRICS Pay has reduced USD usage in intra-block trade by roughly two-thirds, 90%. Let that sink in. The world's two largest powers outside the US have almost completely abandoned the dollar for bilateral trade, and now they have launched a replacement system. The BRICS group has launched a working prototype of a gold-backed trade currency known as the unit. The unit is a digital trade instrument backed by a reserve basket composed of 40% physical gold and 60% BRICS national currencies. The pilot was initiated by IRIAS, which issued 100 units on October 31st, each initially pegged to 1 gram of gold. This is not speculation. This is not theory. This is a functioning prototype for a new monetary system. The unit would allow the 10-member BRICS alliance to conduct trade amongst themselves while having a gold and BRICS currency-backed payment basket to settle transactions. It is emerging as the most viable option for breaking the US dollar's chokehold on global trade and investment, and the implications are staggering. The de-dollarization of central bank reserves is most visible in commodity markets, where a large and growing proportion of energy is being priced in non-dollar denominated contracts. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has slid to a 2-decade low. The share of foreign ownership in the U.S. Treasury market has fallen to 30%, down from a peak of above 50% during the financial crisis. The world is dumping dollars, and it is buying gold. Now let me tell you where silver fits into all of this, because this is the part that should have your complete attention. Silver is increasingly discussed as a potential foundational asset in a future BRICS plus monetary system. A central question in the de-dollarization push is, how do you settle international trade without using the dollar? Gold is an obvious candidate, but it is very expensive. Not every country can realistically settle large volumes of trade in gold. Silver, however, is much cheaper per unit and simultaneously has real industrial demand, meaning it cannot be fully virtualized or replaced by pure digital tokens. And here is where it gets truly historic. India has taken a historic step toward the remonetization of silver, officially allowing the white metal to serve as collateral for bank and non-bank loans under new Reserve Bank of India regulations set to take effect in April 2026. Let me read that again because this is unprecedented. India is remonetizing silver. A person can now pledge up to 10 kilograms of silver for a loan, compared with just 1 kilogram of gold. It is an unintentional but significant reset of the gold-silver ratio. If implemented as reported, this change would make India the first country in modern history to set a structured monetary benchmark for silver, recognizing it as a parallel store of value to gold. And the United States is not far behind. Florida has already taken a concrete step by announcing that gold and silver coins will become legal tender in 2026. The factors indicate a fundamental shift in silver's valuation, moving it beyond an industrial commodity to a triple identity asset: industrial, monetary, and strategic. This is the key insight. Silver is no longer just a metal you use in solar panels and electronics. It is becoming money again. Emerging market central banks such as those of Russia, India, and Saudi Arabia are adding silver to their strategic reserves, treating it not just as an industrial input, but as a monetary asset. When central banks start treating silver as money, everything changes. Now let me tell you what this means for you, because understanding the situation is useless if you do not know how to act on it. As confidence in the dollar's creditworthiness is impaired, central banks and private investors are increasingly turning to gold as a core asset to hedge against dollar risk. This trend of dumping dollars for gold is likely to continue in 2026, with both Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan predicting that gold prices will climb further, reflecting market skepticism toward dollar assets. And what applies to gold applies even more to silver because of its dual identity. Silver's dual identity, part monetary metal, part industrial, positions it uniquely to thrive in this environment. A softer dollar increases global silver affordability. Falling real yields reduce the opportunity cost of holding silver. Rising fiscal deficits and election-driven spending add long-term inflation pressure. If you are holding physical silver, You are positioned exactly where the smartest money in the world wants to be. You are holding an asset that is simultaneously an industrial necessity, a monetary metal, and increasingly a strategic asset recognized by governments. If you are holding paper silver, ETFs, futures contracts, understand the risk you are taking. In a world where supply chains are weaponized politically and paper contracts at the COMEX may fail to deliver, only what you truly own matters. If you are looking to buy, understand that premiums are the new normal. Silver ETFs can help investors hedge against monetary debasement and capitalize on industrial tailwinds. The best thing that investors can do is monitor if indeed there is a movement toward de-dollarization and to diversify investments into different currencies. Silver is that diversification. Silver is the hedge against what is happening to the dollar. Let me leave you with this. The dollar index has fallen to a 4-year low. U.S. debt is nearing $39 trillion. All major credit agencies have downgraded U.S. debt. The IMF says U.S. debt is out of control. BRICS has launched a gold-backed settlement currency. Russia and China settle 90% of trade without dollars. India is remonetizing silver. Florida is making gold and silver legal tender. This is not conspiracy theory. This is data. This is policy. This is reality. High and rising debt and deficits can weigh on a nation's currency by elevating inflation risk, reducing market stability, and weakening fiscal credibility. Forced actions to lower short-term rates, cap long-term yields, or monetize debt can debase the currency. The dollar just broke, and silver is being positioned as part of the solution to what comes next. Some form of crisis is almost inevitable. A fiscal crisis can be sparked by a variety of factors. Although the chances of a major fiscal crisis in the United States remain low in the near term, the likelihood and potential severity of a crisis rises with higher debt. The question is not if the dollar's dominance ends. The question is, what replaces it? And the answer increasingly involves gold and silver. Drop a comment telling me whether you think the dollar will recover or continue to decline. I read every single comment. Subscribe if you have not already. Hit that notification bell because this story is accelerating and you do not want to miss what comes next. The dollar just broke. Silver is becoming money again. And now you understand why. This is AG Profit Hub because the real story is never on the surface. I will see you in the next one.